for places, and when something happens, people go to that place. So I strongly doubt all those resources were allocated to just that. We didn't call for additional police that night. We did in advance have a series of things happening that night. We, for instance, there was, sadly, when the Gophers won a hockey championship a few years ago, we had a little bit of an issue on campus, so we had our eyes open on that. We had a little bit of something. There have been some people doing some wrongful actions on Nicollet Mall a little earlier. We had our eyes open for that. There were a few different things going on. So on any given Saturday night, there are a lot of things that are going on. This was a night where there was a lot going on, and we didn't know what was happening. But I don't believe there were additional resources, significant resources put into this or not. I do think it's always a question we ask ourselves, you know, the idea of how many people do you have out, and it's a tough balance. But I think it was generally right.
That's a really good segue to our next question about Saturday night.
So, given what happened on Saturday night, we all know, given what happened Saturday night, it's a common occurrence downtown Minneapolis, and we noticed that at the end of the day, it's the tip of the iceberg. Frequently, the Minneapolis police are used excessive force. They ride on horseback, at clubs out, predominantly in areas where African Americans frequent, and there's been a slew of different complaints that have been live, and we still haven't seen any type of action around that. Will you basically make sure that they don't use excessive force and pepper spray, chemical agents on patrons after they're done patronizing these clubs, being basically literally shuffled out of the city to just say thank you for your money, have a nice day?
I'll let the chief speak more about this, but in general, we've talked a lot about bar closing. This is a period of time where we have some challenges, and we have had a lot of discussion about how we sometimes have so many people out in the streets that we need to have a very firm hand, frankly. There has been a couple of issues of violence at that time. And our job is
that I hang out enough times, there's never a barricade get me out of my house. I hang out enough times, there's a barricade get me out of the city.
So there's a little different dynamic going on here at closing time. And closing time's a challenge for us right now. And I'll let the chief and Chris Arneson, who's been on the point about saying that, but my job is absolutely to make sure that we have a safe downtown. And we have had to be very firm at bar closing. Sometimes dealing with that many people, often having an awful lot to drink, sometimes other things as well. You have to protect, well, it's important to them. You know, my job is to protect everyone's safety. And so we're going to be tough downtown in protecting people. I think
there's no pepper spray.
Well, I think one of the points you're making is to be tough for citizens and to not use excessive violence, and that's certainly something that I think we hit the balance on. But if you have any incident that you think is important, again, that's exactly why we have this. So if you could work with us on, say on X night something happens, we'd be very happy to review that because we need to keep that balance.
I think we're looking just for a yes or no answer out of you or Chief Dolan with the question of will you publicly denounce the use of chemical agents and mounted police against these innocent civilians downtown? Like, yes,
I think there's a role for mounted police. I think it's terribly important.
What about chemical agents?
And let me explain that to people actually, if I could. I mean, I think this is very important, Jack. You know, one of the issues that the officers have, and this is their job to protect us as well. Imagine yourself as a police officer at, say, 2:15, a lot of people coming out of bars, a lot of people drinking, overwhelming the streets, and it's important for our officers to be able to see and, frankly, to be able to be in control of the streets. It's a tough balancing act, I know, but put yourself in that position. Having the mounted patrol is one of the tools that we use that's important on that, and that's, I think, one of the balances you have on that. But it's about, and I think, as the gentleman mentioned, if there are any incidents that you feel people have used force, then bring that information forward, and we'll review that specific case.
So our next question is actually specifically about that.
Yeah, our next question is specifically about that.
My name is Dee. I'm with Occupy Minneapolis, and on Saturday I was part of the political action that went down. What I saw on that day was a clear-cut case of police brutality against protesters. Police brutality is not an isolated incident in the city, however. Specifically talking about my experiences being a resident of the North, I've seen incidents where young black people primarily have been arrested, detained, beaten up for no other reason than just being black or hanging out in the corners. But in fact, My question to you is simple. Would you condemn such actions, police brutality, against young African Americans such as yourself?
Yeah, you know, if there's police brutality, we condemn that. Fully. Every use of force that we make, whether it's made, so it has to be documented, it has to be reviewed, and needs to be justified. So, if you think if the case is not justified, just bring it forward. And when we deal with cases that are not justified, we discipline those officers, we terminate that. So if you see something like that, you bring it forward. You have an obligation to bring it forward if you think it's inappropriate.
Yeah, I think,
You need to deal with those specific cases, not generalize.
One of the things that just if I could address is a really important point, and one of the things that the chief has led that I've strongly supported is the idea of putting cameras in all of our cars, and it's been a really helpful tool because what it's allowed us to do is to really take a feeling and impression like that's obviously a deep concern to us, and really bring it down to what do we do and how do we fix that. So, for instance, one of the things that we found out with some of those cameras is that a couple of our police officers were using a kick move to restrain someone after they had done a variety of things. Well, that's not something that we want done. We recognize that we had to go back into the training and retrain folks to not do this. So that was an example of taking the broad point you made, which I absolutely condemn, but then bringing that down to a specific way of fixing that behavior. So if you've got anything about that, any film or any incident reported at the time, we can break that broad point down into specific facts.
If I could just have 10 seconds to respond to that, that's all fine and dandy, but bottom line is, when incidents of police brutality go down, cameras are usually not around, and that's usually done on purpose. It's not enough to bring these incidents to the police because the police are frequently proven that they are unable to speak for themselves. So my question to you is, will you publicly condemn these actions when they are brought forth?
Well, I have.
great. Next question? We're gonna go to our next question.
It's good to hear that Chief Dolan is opposed to police brutality, because we are as well. Good to hear him say that.
Can you speak up now?
I said it's good to hear that Chief Dolan is opposed to police brutality, because we are as well, of course. And I think what we're concerned about, what the last two questions are really getting at is why the whole country is upset about the Trayvon Martin situation, because we talk about equality of treatment, right? And what we haven't had, and the fact the room is filled, speaks to the fact that we haven't had that. The Occupy movement hadn't had it, at least recently, and definitely in the black community we have had. We understand, Mayor, that there has to be law enforcement. That's not never our issue. Our issue is that law enforcement acts a little differently downtown on Saturday night, so folks who look like me and they do other folks. And so I guess what we really want to know is, does the buck stop with you? You're the chief exec.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? I mean, you know, we've heard the platitudes, but what are you going to do? Because we know if you actually came out and made an example of someone, it would change things. So what are you going to do as a chief exec to hold your police department accountable?
I'm in charge of the police department, and I hired the chief. They report to me, and this sits on my shoulders. It's not an easy answer to what you're saying. It's something that's about police and people of color all over the country. And we've wrestled with this for a long time in this city, and I'm doing the best I can. So first off, will I hold people accountable? Yes. Number one is I hired a police chief who's removed more people for cause than any police chief in the history of Minneapolis. So I'd like to give him a couple examples, let him give you a couple examples on that. That's a start. More important is to really go back into the idea of trying to say that there may be some police officers who have bad intentions. The vast majority of them have great intentions and are out doing good things. Some of them need some more training. Some of them need to understand some things. So that example I gave about some of the videos we've used to go back in and retrain police is part of it too. Part of it's the broader point of diversifying the force. We've made a lot of progress on that. We got to move a lot further. I'm happy to, for instance, have brought in 2 more Somali officers, of course, as part of that. That's a long-term thing, but I think it's important to have a lot of different cultures on the force.
Okay. I would like to continue to move on because we only have like 7 more minutes with you.
And can I say, I can't possibly do justice to that really important question in a couple minutes. and it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about.